Zeapon has released a bunch of new products recently. We have the PONS pen head, something a lot of us have been waiting for a long time. The PONS PT, there is a Zeapon Timelapse Trigger, and there's also a brand new Zeapon Lab app. So in this video, I'm going to show you all these new products and talk about the pros and cons of them as well. Kia ora, good morning everyone, Richard here. Welcome back to our channel. Today we are going to have a look at all these latest products from Zeapon. But before we start, just the usual disclaimer. All these product samples were sent to me by Zeapon. I do not have to pay for any of them. But this review is not sponsored. It is completely independent, just like all the other reviews on this channel. Okay, let's start by talk about the PONS Motorized pen head first. This PONS Motorized pen head is a module that can pen. This is the product that a lot of us have been waiting for a long time since the original Motorized Micro 2 slider was released, and finally it has arrived. The design of this PONS pen head is quite similar to the Motorized module for the Zeapon slider. It's a box-shaped design. There are 3 buttons on the unit, one for power on, power off, and then there's one button for each direction. If you double click, then it will go the continuous rotation, and single click on the power button, you can change the speed. There are 3 different speed settings that is available. If you have a Zeapon slider, you should be very familiar with the control of this PONS pen head. The size of this PONS pen head is a little bit bigger and heavier than I thought it would be. The weight of the pen head module by itself is 850 grams without the battery. So once you add the battery, it would be 1 kilogram easily or more than that. But one main reason why it's heavy is because it has a very strong motor inside it. The maximum payload of this PONS Motorized pen head is 50 kilograms horizontally, which I believe is the highest among all the similar products in the market. The build quality of this PONS Motorized pen head is nice, very nice. It is very solid, and the module is pretty much completely made of metal. The pen head is powered by the Sony NP-F type battery, which you have to buy yourself. The screw at the top of the module can support both 1/4 and 3/8 inch screws without the need to have any adapter because of the spring-loaded design. The screw can also be fully hidden by just push it in using your finger and then turn it. So when you want to transport it and put it into your bag, it won't have a screw that is sticking out. And also that allows you to turn this module upside down, and it can sit nicely on a flat surface. So why do you want to do that? I'll tell you very soon. Attach this PONS Motorized pen head to a slider. You put the slider here, and you can just screw it onto here. And you can now transform the 1-axis slider shot to a 2-axis shot like this one. The motor is also pretty quiet, and the movement is very smooth. But it's not just that. The beauty of this pen head module is you can just use this pen head module by itself. You just need to turn this module upside down and attach this provided plate onto the screw here. And once you've done that, and you can now use the pen head to rotate your subject nice and smoothly. This is great if you are shooting something like product video. Or you can combine it together but not attach it to the slider to create effects like this. Now, while the Motorized pen head already allows you to be a lot more creative than just using a slider, you can go to another level with the PONS PT module. PT stands for Pan and Tilt, so the PONS PT is a module that allows you to create both pan and tilt movement. Combine it with the Zeapon slider, you can now get 3-axis movement it can go sideways using the slider, and then you have the pan direction and tilt direction rotation as well. The PONS PT module is basically two PONS pen heads that are linked together 90 degrees using a metal bracket. The arm that connects to the camera is also adjustable in two different places. The adjustments is to allow you to fit and balance with most cameras in the market, even with a slightly larger lens attached to the camera. And I just said balance the camera because just like using a gimbal, you should balance the camera when you mount it onto the PONS PT. However, unlike a gimbal, where all the joints are basically unlocked and freely rotatable when you power it off so that you can balance the camera perfectly, with the PONS PT, all the joints, even if you are not powering it on, are locked. So there's no really easy way for you to balance it perfectly, at least not that I'm aware of. But because the motors on these PONS pen head modules are really strong and it has a maximum payload of 4 kg, so you just need to use your eyes and your hand to judge where the center of gravity is and try to adjust the camera position to as close as what you think it should be correct, and that should be fine. The quick release plate is ARCA Swiss compatible, and if you look at the back of the quick release plate, there are some magnets on it. So what it means is when you mount the camera onto the unit, and the bottom plate would just snap and follow the camera position, so that allows you to lock the camera very easily and securely. And then you can create video like this with the PONS PT attached to the Zeapon Motorized slider. And next, I want to talk about the brand new Zeapon Lab app, because even though each of these PONS module has physical buttons on it for you to control them separately by just using the buttons on it, you really need to use the Zeapon Lab to control all of them together to create some nice multi-axis camera movement for your video. And there are also so much more you can do with the app as well. This Zeapon Lab is a completely redesigned app that has a very different user interface from the original Zeapon Lab. It's available for both iOS and Android. When you start the app, the first thing to do is to connect all the modules to the app. If the app cannot be connected to your slider, make sure you have upgraded the firmware for the slider to the latest. You can go to their website to download the latest firmware and then use the USB cable connected to the slider to update the firmware on your slider. So once you have connected all your devices, you can press the Done button on the bottom right and start controlling them. But before that, I want to mention there is a setting button at the top right of the screen, and if you press into that, then there are some additional features, including the firmware update. You can update your firmware wirelessly using that feature. Okay, now let's go to the main screen of the app. The main screen consists of 3 parts. The top part is for you to manage your waypoints, and then we have a speed control slider in the middle for you to control the speed of the playback of the waypoints, and then at the bottom, this is where you control all your Zeapon devices. There are 2 virtual joysticks. The left one is for you to control the tilt and pan, and the right one is for you to control the slider movement. Obviously, Zeapon has a follow focus module that will be coming soon. Hopefully, we don't have to wait 2 years before we see it. So the idea is you can control your whole Zeapon systems using the 2 virtual joysticks. Set your waypoint. You can program from 2 to 6 waypoints in total. Then you press the waypoint that you want as the starting point. This is very important because I didn't know it at the beginning. And after that, then you just need to press the play button and it will move the whole system to the starting point and play back the waypoint that you have programmed. It is very straightforward, and once you learn the basics and follow the steps, it is very easy to use. If you are using the PONS PT, you can use the 2 little buttons on the left of the screen to lock either the pan or the tilt axis for those shots that you don't want to change one of them. You can also enable the playback loop by pressing the loop button at the bottom left of the screen, and when you play back the waypoint, it will be looping forever. Before you press the play button, you can also adjust the playback speed using the slider at the middle of the screen. Now with this new version of the app, the speed is applied globally to all the waypoints. Unfortunately, it means you cannot control the playback speed of individual waypoints. And with the current firmware, if you set multiple waypoints, there is a tiny pulse at the end of each waypoint. Zeapon told me they will remove this pulse by a future firmware update. But there's more. Press the button at the bottom right and you can see some additional modes that you can use. The first one is the default video mode that we just looked at. Then the next one is the intelligent time-lapse mode. The intelligent time-lapse mode is basically a beginner time-lapse mode. You enter the shutter speed, the interval time, set a speed, and the app will calculate everything else for you. If you have never shot any time-lapse video before and you want to try it out, this is the mode that you should start with. Remember, you need to also connect a shutter cable from the Zeapon device to your camera. The shutter cable is not included in any of the Zeapon products. You need to purchase one for your camera separately. Then the next mode is the customized time-lapse mode. This is like an expert time-lapse mode. You have the control of all the important time-lapse parameters. So if you know exactly what you want, this is the time-lapse mode that you will most likely be using. Then we have the stop motion mode for you to create stop motion video. It's a bit like the time-lapse mode, but you will trigger the shutter yourself when you are ready. And if you have done any stop motion video before, you probably know how easy is it to make a mistake when you are taking photos for your stop motion video. So one very nice feature of this stop motion video mode is, if you made a mistake or you just want to reshoot part of the stop motion video, you can jump to a particular photo in the sequence and reshoot from that point onwards. Then we have the panorama mode. This is for you to create a 360-degree shot by doing multiple exposure. You just need to enter the camera information, for example, the focal length, the sensor size, and then the app will work out how much to rotate between each shot and how many photos together is needed. You do need to merge the photos yourself using your photo editing software. And then we have the matrix mode. This is very similar to the panorama mode, but instead of creating a 360-degree photo, it will create a big wide-angle photo that involves both tilting and panning the camera. It is not very clear to me how wide the combined photo would be, but by playing with the settings, it seems like the result photo should be similar to what you would capture using a 30mm lens on a full-frame camera. One thing about the panorama and the matrix mode is they are both quite automatic, and the number of photos it would take is calculated by the app and you can't really change it. I had a chat with Zeapon about this and suggested I would love to have a bit more control in these two modes. For example, in the panorama mode, I don't always want to do a 360-degree panorama photo. I may only want to do a 180 or even 100-degree panorama photo instead. Zeapon said they will look into that and will allow us to have more control in the future. And then the last mode is the camera mode. And this one would require the Zeapon Timelapse Trigger. So I will talk about both at the same time. The Zeapon Timelapse Trigger is quite an interesting product. I said that because when Zeapon told me about this product a few months ago, I just couldn't really understand what it is. I thought it is just a wireless camera trigger, which it kind of is, but the main feature is not that. It's not until I receive the timelapse trigger and start playing with it, then I finally understand what it is. So let me try to explain it to you now. Usually when you are shooting time-lapse video with a motorized device, for example, if you attach your camera to a Zeapon motorized slider and do a time-lapse, the slider would move to a certain position, then it would trigger the camera using the shutter cable, and then the slider would move again and trigger the camera shutter again, and so on and you would need to set a fixed shutter speed in the Zeapon Lab app and also on the camera to make sure the slider does not move when the camera is taking photo. So this is pretty much how most of the time-lapse mode works for a lot of slider or even gimbals. However, the problem is the shutter speed has to be fixed. So if you're shooting when the lighting doesn't change or shooting indoor, then it's probably okay. But if you are shooting when the lighting changes very dramatically, for example, a daytime to nighttime time lapse, then it wouldn't work very well, as you will need a very different shutter speed to get the correct exposure during daytime and nighttime. And this is how the Zeapon Timelapse Trigger would help solve the problem. It is a very small device that you attach to the camera's hot shoe mount, and it has a built-in rechargeable battery that lasts 14 hours. So you just set the waypoints in the Zeapon Lab app as usual, then you go to the camera mode. Just enter the number of photos you want to capture and also the frame per second, and this is just for the app to calculate and tell you the length of the video that you will create. Press the start button, and now you go to your camera. You need to turn on the flash rear sync option on your camera, because that's how the timelapse trigger detect if the camera has took a photo. Then go to your camera's time-lapse mode. You need to set the same total number of photos that you want to capture, but pretty much everything else is just up to you. Then you start the time-lapse shooting on the camera. So what is going to happen now is the camera will take photo using its time-lapse feature, and the Zeapon Timelapse Trigger will detect it through the hot shoe connection. The trigger will tell the Zeapon Lab app to move the slider, etc. to the next position and get ready for the next photo, and then the camera will take the next photo, and then the time-lapse trigger detect it and then tell the app to move everything to the next position and repeat it like this. One thing you have to be aware of when using the time-lapse trigger is your smart device has to be within 10 or 15 meters or so from the time-lapse trigger, because if you get too far away, then you would disconnect it and the time-lapse mode wouldn't work. But your smart device, you don't have to be running the Zeapon app in the foreground. You can switch to other app, you can send message, you can use Facebook, whatever you want. As long as the Zeapon app is running in the background, then the time-lapse mode would continue to work. So instead of the camera is driven by the app, which is how the intelligent time-lapse and the customized time-lapse mode work, in the camera mode, the time-lapse is driven by the camera. It doesn't matter if the shutter speed is really fast or really slow. The app will just wait for the camera to fire and respond to that. So we no longer need to fix the shutter speed for the whole time-lapse sequence, and that removes the big limitation that is usually associated with time-lapse that are controlled by external devices. If you shoot a lot of time-lapse with the Zeapon device, getting this time-lapse trigger is really a no-brainer. Okay, now I have showed you all the new products from Zeapon, the PONS Penhead, the PONS PT, Zeapon Timelapse Trigger, and the new Zeapon Lab. And now let me tell you some of the things I like and don't like about these products. Let's talk about what I don't like first. The PONS modules are quite a bit bigger and heavier than I thought it would be, especially the weight. Having the PONS PT sitting on top of the Micro 2 Plus, it looks quite top heavy. The firmware and also the Zeapon Lab seems to be a bit buggy right now when I'm doing this review in September 2021, especially the Android version of the Zeapon Lab. There were a few times that I have to restart all the modules and restart the app to get everything working again. So hopefully Zeapon can iron out most of these issues in the very near future, as the Zeapon app is now a crucial part of the whole system. I was a bit surprised when I didn't see any carry case that comes with this PONS PT module, because I think all the Zeapon sliders that I have tried in the past, they all come with a very nice carry case. And since this PONS PT, it consists of a few different parts, and when you want to carry it from one place to other, you usually have to take it apart. So there are a few different pieces, and without a carry case, it will be quite difficult to carry them nicely. Right now I can only put it back in the original box, which is not exactly the easiest way to pack this PONS PT system, and if I use it to carry around the system, it probably won't last very long as well. And now let's talk about the things I like. The thing I like the most is flexibility of this system. The modular design of the PONS pen head and the PONS PT give you a lot of flexibility. While a lot of people would be using the PONS pen head or the PONS PT with the motorized Zeapon slider, but you can just use the PONS pen head by itself, or using the PONS PT without the slider, you can just put it onto a tripod and use it to create different kind of camera movement and results. The second thing I like is also flexibility, but it's not about the feature, it's about your wallet. Since all the modules can work by itself, you can buy them in pretty much any order. You can buy the slider first, or you can buy a PONS pen head first, and then buy another pen head, and then with the brackets, you can turn it into a PONS PT. So it's really up to you in any order that you want to buy any of this gear. And while it doesn't really make sense to buy the Timelapse Trigger first, you can add it pretty much anytime after you got your first Zeapon motorized product. And speaking of the wallet, another thing that I really like is the price of these new products. The Timelapse Trigger is very affordable, but I'm just very surprised by the price of the PONS pen head and the PONS PT. I checked the price of some of its competitors. The Zeapon is a lot cheaper than pretty much all of them, but it has higher maximum payload and a few extra selling points, and also it's still a very nice and solid quality product. With these new products, Zeapon is no longer in a one-dimensional world and is now becoming a complete ecosystem. If you have any questions about any of these Zeapon products, please drop a comment below and I will try my best to answer. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I will see you in my next video.